This is one of the principal birthplaces of liberal religion in America, the Universalist Heritage Center in Winchester, New Hampshire. Universalist congregations began forming in New England in the late 1770s. By 1794, they extended from Long Island Sound to central Vermont and New Hampshire, and from the Atlantic to Lake Champlain. The majority were in the hill country of central Massachusetts, southern New Hampshire, and southern Vermont. Winchester, New Hampshire, is at the center of this region.
It was in the meeting house here that Universalists gathered in 1803 to draft the Declaration of Faith that became known as the Winchester Profession. This served Universalists for almost a century. It was understood to be included in later declarations of faith and was never repealed. It is the great-great-grandparent of the 7 principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association. The building that today houses the Universalist Heritage Center was built with donations from Universalists across the country to commemorate the Winchester Profession after the original meeting house was lost to fire.
Though Universalists would adopt other, more modern-sounding declarations of faith in later years, the Winchester Profession remains a good introduction to their unique point of view. It begins, "We believe that the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testaments contain a revelation of the character of God and of the duty, interest, and final destination of mankind." Within this endorsement of the Bible, typical of the time, we find 2 crucial words signaling that Universalism was something new. One of these words is the smallest one, A. We believe that the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testaments contain a revelation, not the unique revelation, but a revelation, one revelation among many. The Jewish and Christian religious traditions weren't the only sources for early Universalists. Others were potentially of value as well.
This openness to insights from other religions led some Universalists in the 20th century to symbolize Universalism by an off-center cross inside a simple, unbroken circle. The circle represents a single, unified, and all-embracing humanity, and the cross as only one, a Christian, expression of it, leaving room for other religious points of view. The other crucial word is inconspicuous too, contain. The Holy Scriptures contain a revelation. The Bible itself is not a revelation, it contains a revelation. Some parts of the Bible are religiously important, but other parts are not. How can these parts be distinguished? By people using their hearts and minds. In the final analysis, each person is his or her own religious authority. The Winchester Profession continues, "We believe that there is one God whose nature is love." Universalists adopted the New Testament words, "God is love," from the first letter of John, as their key theological concept.
In their homes, they sewed it into samplers that were hung in the parlor. In their churches, they painted it on pulpits and carved it into chancel tables. These 3 simple and powerful words are widely used today. This loving God, Universalists believed, would somehow find a way to save all people, the whole family of humankind. Universalists believed that everyone would eventually be welcomed in heaven. This belief, which theologians call universal salvation, is what gave Universalists their name. They believed God's love was universal, embracing everyone.
Many were scandalized by this. They asked, without the threat of eternal hellfire, why should people be good? In several states, Universalists were barred from serving on juries or testifying as witnesses. It was presumed that a Universalist would have no motive to be honest.
Multitudes who embrace these doctrines embrace them because they are so congenial with the debased and perverted feelings of their corrupted and depraved hearts.
Universalists replied with characteristic originality. People should be good and do good, they said. because God has created human nature so that we find it religiously fulfilling to so conduct our lives. Doing good is how to be happy in this life. Virtue is a natural result of our fundamental humanness.
A story about Hosea Ballou illustrates that attitude. One day a Baptist circuit rider, shocked to learn that Universalists didn't believe in eternal hellfire, said to Hosea Ballou, then a Universalist circuit rider, "Why, if I were a Universalist, I could knock you over the head, steal your wallet and horse, and have nothing to worry about." "If you were a Universalist," replied Ballou, "the thought would never occur to you."
Appended to the Winchester Profession was a so-called Liberty Clause, affirming the freedom of Universalist churches to add their own particular beliefs to the denominational profession. In later declarations of faith, Universalists enlarged this Liberty Clause until it eventually affirmed complete freedom of belief for every individual. Today, Universalism is sometimes confused with Unitarianism because in 1961, the two denominations were consolidated into the Unitarian Universalist Association after many decades of parallel development. It's useful to note some historical differences between the two groups. American Universalism as an organized body was founded in 1793 as an association of congregations. The American Unitarian Association was founded in 1825, mostly as a publishing and educational organization for the Unitarians. Universalism was a more populist movement, while Unitarianism was a heresy within the congregational churches that formed the New England establishment.
Universalism developed in the hill country of central New England, an area that was then the frontier. Unitarianism developed in long-established settlements around Boston. Universalists were, by and large, from a less privileged social class than Unitarians. Hosea Ballou, who was the principal Universalist leader for more than 40 years, was born in a log cabin in Richmond, New Hampshire, and had less than 2 years' formal education.
William Ellery Channing, his Unitarian counterpart, was born into an aristocratic family in Newport, Rhode Island, and was educated at Harvard.
Universalism developed among lay people. The classic 1770 story of a New Jersey farmer, Thomas Potter, meeting the Universalist lay preacher from England, John Murray, illustrates the readiness of ordinary people to embrace universal salvation.
American Unitarianism originated in Massachusetts, primarily among Harvard-educated clergy. The selection of Henry Ware Sr. as a Harvard professor of divinity sparked the controversy between the liberal Unitarians and conservative Congregationalists in the early 19th century.
The first Universalists were come-outers, who walked out of their home congregations and started new liberal congregations. This parallels the experience of many Unitarian Universalists today.
The first Unitarians tended to be stay-inners whose congregations were gradually guided by their ministers in a liberal direction.
Universalists had to build their own meeting houses.
Unitarians inherited buildings that had been constructed by the town and were maintained at public expense.
While both religious groups championed the use of reason and individual freedom of belief, their theological viewpoints had different perspectives. Thomas Starr King, first a Universalist and then a Unitarian minister, quoted a Universalist minister describing those differences. "The Universalist believes that God is too good to damn us forever, and you Unitarians believe you are too good to be damned." This referred to the Unitarians' higher estimation of human nature, with their doctrine of salvation by character, while Universalists concentrated on God's love for humanity. Hosea Ballou expressed the Universalist view provocatively: salvation irrespective of character. Salvation was not so much earned as it was a gift from a loving God.
In the 1930s, Universalists wanted to express their faith without using the term salvation. They said, "We avow our faith in the supreme worth of every human personality." This is the origin of the first Unitarian Universalist principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The spirituality expressed in the seventh Unitarian Universalist principle is also solidly grounded in the experience of the early Universalists, many of whom struggled to scratch out a living on the frontier and experienced nature as an all-powerful reality on which they were totally dependent.
While Unitarians have a higher historical profile in early American reform movements, Universalists also were pioneers in many areas. Consider, for example, the issue of anti-slavery. The Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing was called a reluctant radical for his early hesitancy to speak against slavery. There is evidence that he began preaching about slavery as early as 1826. However, his sermons were often not well received by his congregation, many of whom were textile mill owners whose business interests depended on cheap Southern cotton made possible by slave labor. In a 1790 meeting in Philadelphia, Universalists adopted an anti-slavery statement composed by Declaration of Independence signer Dr. Benjamin Rush, which was adopted in 1794 by New England Universalists meeting in Oxford, Massachusetts. The Universalists were the second denomination in the nation to oppose slavery, the Quakers being the first. The Unitarian denomination never went on record as opposing slavery.
Another example of Universalist progressivism is the Ordination of Women. The ordination of Olympia Brown to the Universalist ministry in 1863 by the St. Lawrence Universalist Association marked the first time in America that a woman was ordained by a denominational body. Unitarianism spread slowly, mostly to cities, as transplanted Northeasterners brought their religion with them. Universalism spread rapidly, not only to cities but to rural areas as well, carried by saddlebag preachers eager to spread the good news. Universalists founded schools and colleges, including what are now the California Institute of Technology, the University of Akron, St. Lawrence University, and Tufts University. During the 19th century, Universalists grew to be America's sixth largest denomination, many times larger than the Unitarian denomination.
But by the mid-20th century, Universalists had shrunk to a relatively tiny denomination, ready for consolidation with the larger American Unitarian Association. One reason for Universalism's decline was that its distinctiveness was blurred when other denominations began to downplay hellfire and emphasize God's love.
Hell is the ultimate consequence of sin itself. Rather than a place, hell indicates the state of those who freely and definitively separate themselves from God, the source of all life and joy.
Another reason for Universalism's decline had to do with Universalists' fear of centralized authority. In 1792, Universalists in Newport, Rhode Island, were reported to be reluctant even to meet with each other for Sunday worship, for fear of the ecclesiastical structure which they felt would inevitably follow from holding regular meetings. To the very end of its independent existence, the Universalist denomination never allowed its national organization to have significant authority.
Yet another reason for Universalist decline was that as Universalists made their way up the socio-economic ladder, they de-emphasized the most radical parts of their message in order to blend in with mainstream denominations. Like the Unitarians before them, they began to speak of salvation as more a matter of character development than a loving God's unconditional gift to every person. Universalism seemed to have lost its prophetic edge. Universalism experienced a theological rebirth in the decades flanking World War II. A new declaration of faith incorporated humanist values, and a new generation of leaders reconnected Universalism to its radical roots.
When the Universalist Church of America and the American Unitarian Association consolidated in 1961, the more prominent Unitarian name came to be the one most often used. Unitarian Universalist was shortened to Unitarian by many people. Now, Universalism as a theology with a broad appeal in an increasingly interfaith, multicultural world has increased acceptance. It plays a prominent role in theological discussions in seminaries and in parishes.
To our children in 2003 A.D. When you, our great-grandchildren, shall enter the dawn of 2003, do not forget the parents' names herein inscribed, whose words and works are herein recorded, whose bodies sleep in the dust, but whose spirits have returned to their God. We have done our best for you, and believe that during 1903 we firmly built on the solid foundation which our fathers laid in 1803. We charge you, who will be the supporters of the dear Winchester Church, to never fail to keep alive the sacred fires of our faith on this holy altar.
People of Universalist heritage, as well as those who have come to a new appreciation of the power of Universalism in history and theology, are reinvigorating that tradition. Eager to maintain a connection with Universalism's spiritual taproot and radical vision, they reinterpret the Universalist message for a new generation. They see the importance of applying Universalist perspectives to current problems.
The Universalist Heritage Foundation has recently formed to keep alive both the heritage of Universalism and its message, which is richly relevant to today's spiritual seekers. Its mission is to celebrate and preserve the rich legacy of the Universalist faith, to educate future generations in the Universalist tradition, and to continue to put forth the Universalist message as an agent of hope for a fractured world.
A Universalist Heritage Center is being developed in this handsome building in Winchester, New Hampshire, site of the adoption of the defining 1803 Winchester Profession of Belief. Through the generosity of several donors, the Universalist Heritage Foundation was able to purchase the building. However, to maintain it and develop a program will require considerable additional funding.
If you would like to support this project, please contact the Universalist Heritage Foundation at P.O. Box 6441, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03063-6441, or Universalist Heritage Foundation at gmail.com.
As poet Edwin Markham said after worshiping at the Church of the Divine Paternity, that's now Fourth Universalist Church in New York City, these familiar words: "He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in."